and a couple I invented.
You have to be faithful to what they really were.
But I certainly wouldn't, you know, deign to think that we are godfathering anything.
I do.
And that's why he's got the beard.
First nice thing the press have ever done.
I was really happy to find out this is where we were coming.
I said, I'm in.
The festival of the people who live here.
That was amazing.
Our moderator for this session is Eric Kohanek, and it is now my pleasure to welcome the director, producer, screenwriter, and cast of Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning. Welcome to the press conference for Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. I'm Eric Kohanek, your moderator. If you have any questions, feel free to pop up your hand really high so we'll get a microphone to you. Let me just do some quick introductions first from left to right. We have Justin Chadwick, who's the film's director. Next to Justin, we have Lindiwe Matsukiza, who takes on the role of Zinzi Mandela, Nelson Mandela's daughter. Next to Lindy, we have RIAAD MOOSA, who takes on the role of Ahmed Kathrada, Nelson's associate. Next to him, in the central role of Nelson Mandela, Idris Elba. Next to Idris, we have Naomie Harris, who takes on the role of Winnie Mandela. Next to Naomie, we have Terry PHETO, who plays the part of Nelson Mandela's first wife, Evelyn. Next to Terry, we have DEON LOTZ, who takes on the role of Kobe Coetzee, the politician who was instrumental in negotiating the whole Mandela deal. And next to DEON, we have ANANT Singh, the producer of the movie, and David Thompson, the producer of the movie, one of the producers, two of the producers. And last but certainly not least, the man who provided the words for the film, screenwriter William Nicholson. I'll throw it open right away, first of all to Anna. Last night at the world premiere screening, you spoke very passionately beforehand about the long walk that you had in bringing this project to the screen. Do you want to talk a bit about that and the journey that this film has had for you?
Thank you. You know, growing up in South Africa as an activist, as a young man, the story of Nelson Mandela is one that you get to know about, and the more you learn about it, the more fascinated you are. So this was going back 25 years ago when I started communicating and I wrote to him while he was in prison about trying to tell this story, his story, into a motion picture. And he was very flattering because he sent a note back, you know, to via a friend because he couldn't write letters easily. And he said that, would anybody want to see a movie about my life? And here we are 25 years later. There have been several movies about him. And you know, when he came out of prison, I got to meet him. And again, I pursued on this path. And finally, he chose me and granted me the rights against tough competition to Long Walk to Freedom, his autobiography. And I was very honored, but with that came a lot of responsibility. And it's taken all this time, but we're very proud of this special team that came together to make the film.
Question down front. Sean Leathong, CHCH News. This question's for Idris. This film, having shot it, I want to know what your contact was like with Mr. Mandela, and what was it like for you this past summer during his extended stay in hospital?
Well, you know, I didn't have an opportunity to sit with Mr. Mandela. Obviously, because of his health reasons, you know, he wasn't a part of the sort of production of this film. And like everybody, you know, been very concerned for his health, but keeping ourselves optimistic and, you know, our prayers of his family.
Yes, good morning. Bruce Kirkland from the Toronto Sun Media. One of the earlier films that ANANT referred to was, of course, not as successful as we hope your film is going to be. But when I talked to Terrence Howard and Jennifer Hudson when they were making the movie, they had elevated their own lives by the research into their characters. They learned so much about themselves as well as the characters they were playing that it was an astonishing experience for them, even if the film didn't turn out that successfully. And I'm curious if what you learn, and Naomie as well, about yourselves as well as the characters you were playing.
For me, it wasn't really so much what I learned about myself, but it was really more about learning about the life of Mandela than Winnie. Because here's a man who, faced with so much brutality, faced with so many challenges, so much degradation, and instead of, he could have done what most of us would have done, which is retaliated, been bitter, angry, and instead he elevated his human nature and he responded with compassion, understanding, and with thoughts of reconciliation. And it just showed me what we as human beings are capable of. We don't normally overcome the baser aspects of our personality, but he did, and that was really inspiring for me.
I think, when you work in the entertainment industry, having patience is something that you need to understand. And what I took away from my preparation for this film is a new understanding of the word patience, and also sacrifice, from Mr. Mandela's life and his family, and also the great country which is South Africa. I learned a new understanding of those words, so I think that stuck with me.
I'm just going to toss it over to Justin and Bill. Anand talked about the great responsibility of telling the story. I wonder if each of you can talk about the process you went through and in shouldering that responsibility as well. Maybe we'll start with Bill.
Well, if you can imagine that it's a huge story, and there are a whole lot of different ways you can tell this. If you imagine yourself sitting down, how do you make a two-hour odd movie out of this life? And believe you me, we tried all of the ways you could do it. We tried the flashback way, the way of starting in prison, the way of starting with his release, and so on. And in the end, what we realized was that what's extraordinary about Mandela is cumulative. We're gradually building up an awareness of what this man has been through to get to the moral victory. I mean, it's a movie about a moral victory. The crucial bit in the film, in my opinion, is the bit where he realizes that his enemies, his oppressors, are more afraid of him than he is of them. And that, when you realize you have the responsibility to deliver something as powerful and as significant a message to the world, you really have to do it straight. And in the end, I created a screenplay that tried to do that straight, and it was Justin who then brought the magic to it, that brought it to life.
And for me, it was at this film festival 3 years ago that ANANT started to talk to me about making Long Walk, and I was very resistant at first, because how do you even begin to tell that story, as Bill says, in a 2-hour film, So for me, it was a responsibility, because I knew how important it was to South Africa, and I knew how important it was to the rest of the world, and ANANT. And so ANANT got me to go down to South Africa, and I met with the comrades, and I then met with the family, and I met with people on both sides of the conflict and spent time with them. And because ANANT had been very, very involved with the family since he first wrote that letter, I had this amazing access to just spending time with the Mandelas as a family. And I then realized, there was a way through, which was essentially what this man had given up, the effect it had on the children, the sense of loss and this sacrifice that he'd made. And it was that connected very strongly with me, which I then started to work with the team. And eventually it was, I got to meet Mandela himself, and I was more and more sure that was the right way of going for this particular film, to make it personal, to make him feel, to portray him as a man, as a human being. You know, we all know how important Madiba is, and he is this icon of our times, and that we live in a time that he's lived in. But he is a man, and he has a family and children, and he has had to undergo this incredible sacrifice, and has this power, as Naomie says, for forgiveness, you know. So those were the themes. I mean, we couldn't tell the whole, how can you even begin? You read the book, you know. You look at all those wonderful documentaries that have been made. It's one of the most well-covered pieces of periods of history, the South African struggle. So our story was a much more personal take on it.
Just very quickly to say, isn't it extraordinary to think that the politics of it fall perfectly into the marriage, that you get a whole way of approach from Mandela and from Winnie, so we were able to make the political personal, and that is the real story we were given. And what an extraordinary gift to a dramatist that was.
Over here in the third row.
Good morning, everybody. Congratulations for the movie. I had the chance to see it yesterday, and I love it. This question is for Justin, and I want to ask you about the cinematography and the visual part of the movie, because it's beautiful. And I love the costume design, the set decoration. Like, how was the process to just resemble all those years, you know, in South Africa? That's so beautiful.
It was 2 years. I mean, since that trip to when ANANT took me down, I then travelled the country. And I was very aware that, you know, coming from Manchester, that I was from outside. So to actually live there, to work in that community, work with these unbelievably brilliant, talented, wonderful South Africans, you know, the crew. So I just travelled the country, just watching, observing, seeing the landscape. The landscapes, you know, are stunning in South Africa. It's a beautiful country. The people are beautiful people. And but just spending time there, so, you know, like where Winnie gets married, for example, was a place which no one's ever shot in before. We had to build a bridge to get into that community, into those mountains. And, you know, I knew that it was going to be quite a tough shoot in terms of a physical shoot. And we're in an independent movie, you know, it's an independent movie. We haven't got a big studio behind us. So I knew we'd be in very remote places when we were shooting, and I'd had an experience with Naomie on The First Grader, where we were in a similar remote environment. So I persuaded ANANT, who was very open to it, although I'm not sure how he feels now with the cost of it, but we shot it on 35mm, because I knew that the cameras were a bust, and I knew that, you know, that we could be out in the middle of a very remote area and shoot on 35mm. But essentially, I was very, very, very keen that this film didn't feel false in any way, that the environments were 360-degree environments where we created with the crowd, who were all, you know, obviously from those communities, and that Idris and Naomie and the rest of the cast could walk onto the sets and be in amongst it. I wanted the audience to feel like they were dropped right in the middle of it, and that it felt visceral, and that was something I strove very hard. And that's because I went in and I used the communities where we were shooting. They were all involved in the construction teams, involved in the extras and the supporting artists. So those crowds that you see when Idris and Naomie speak, or Lindiwe speaks in front of the crowds, some of those crowds have actually been there at the time, you know, seen the real Zinzi, seen the real Mandela, heard them. So that the energy was palpable, and there is this unbelievable, raw energy in South Africa, isn't there? Which is just powerful and invigorating and energizing for us as filmmakers and actors and artists in front of it. It was the most wonderful, energizing experience, I think, for all of us.
Our production designer, Johnny Briett, has been on and off the picture for about 8 years, and in the last 3 years he was on full time. He was, you know, the research and all the detail, you know, that he brought to the screen, and really did it phenomenally well. The character that RIAAD plays, Ahmed Katrada, was very involved in advising us, and we rebuilt the Robben Island prison. And when he came into the courtyard, he said, "It feels like home."
Hi, Hi, Nadia Neofiti from Eyewitness News in South Africa. Idris, very tough challenge to take on Madiba, but you get him unequivocally so. I just wanted to ask you, and then the rest of the cast, you didn't have the interaction with him personally, so what particularly did you rely on to get his essence of who he is in your research? And then just for the rest of the cast, South African and Naomie, working with Idris, when was the moment when you knew that he got it? He got the role, that he was Madiba. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Justin touched upon, you know, the idea that the film, it was a 360 set. You know, we built Orlando on a stage set. Orlando was built from every single detail. So, you know, Idris stepping into the shoes of Mandela was aided by the fact that I was completely surrounded. And then, you know, my early sort of preparations for Mandela involved me also going to South Africa and just staying there and understanding and sort of just being an observer. I began to feed off that. Everywhere you turn, anybody you talk to can talk about Mandela in some way or form. And I would just really honestly soak that up. And there were various stages along the way where I became more engrossed in detailed sort of preparation. But a lot of it was about the energy. You know, there were some scenes that, you know, Justin would just say, I don't want to rehearse this. I'm just going to walk you into a room and I want you to go for it. There's 4 cameras on you. Just go for it. And, you know, we are talking about working in Soweto. We are talking about working with people that have been, like Justin said, through the struggle. Some people that are younger than the struggle and, you know, have heard. And their reference of Mandela is a different reference, you know. So it was an energy thing, you know. I certainly just plugged into the energy of Mandela and the way people respect him. And that helped me sort of craft my performance, I think.
From my point, when we were filming in the president's house, and we were sitting there, the scene where we were watching the television, and Mandela made the speech with a little note. And yeah, many people have tried the accent and being Mandela, but this is where I would like to commend you for the wonderful work. I mean, I got goosebumps as we were sitting there watching, because we saw the performance on screen as we were filming this, and I just knew this was Mandela. I mean, if you closed your eyes, you could hear Mandela, and that was brilliant. Well done.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah,
Thanks.
You're a good actor. That was the big moment. I mean, that was really, it felt so real. Every time you stepped into the room, every time we filmed those scenes around the negotiations, you sit there, and I was in awe of just the fact that the energy you spoke about, of feeling that energy and just the vibe and the wonderful spirit that was created on set. But it was just, every moment was magical.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yes, and for me, honestly, I have met Madiba before, and everyone will tell you about the Madiba magic, and I think that's what Idris managed to capture, the spirit of Madiba, and also having to play the first wife and see the man before the icon, before the politician. It was a very special journey that I am proud and honored to be part of this film and to have worked with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Idris also didn't tell you that he actually slept on Robben Island one of the nights. They locked him up for the night. We decided to stay at the hotel, but they locked him up and they left. And I don't know how he did that. It was amazing. That's very dedicated.
That's when I knew he's got it. He's crazy enough to do that. He's going to do a great job.
Yes, Oswald Phil's Caribbean and Commerce magazine. I'm very curious, for the non-South Africans on your team, what sort of cultural adjustments and surprises you found going down there? I'm curious about that.
I mean, for me, it was this total acceptance of what we were doing. I mean, I was conscious going in from you know, with this iconic South African story. You know, I'm not from South Africa. But it was right from the beginning, right from the first night. The first night I was with Barbara Hogan and Ahmed Kathrada, you know, and just the way they accepted me was, it was really indicative of the whole experience in South Africa. And we shot, I mean, it culminated in, as Idris says, we went into Soweto in places that had never been shot before, into Kliptown, areas that, you know, you hear in the press are very, very troublesome areas where you can't, I mean, all those scenes, like the scenes at the end of the movie where there's celebrations, that was the whole of those communities in Kliptown and Soweto celebrating. And it was just, there was just this acceptance of us making it, and for us from being outside, and Idris, you know, I'm not saying it was, you know, but I mean, I think for Idris it was possibly a different experience, because he would then have to, I would be working with, you know, 1,000, 2,000 people in the crowd, and Idris or Naomie would be set before, and because I wanted it to feel immediate, the performances, like we were just catching the performances, as Idris said, I'd sometimes just not rehearse it when we had a lot of the community who were waiting, so I'd walk Idris into that. So it must have been daunting, that, but within seconds of him walking onto the stages, they were there supporting him, supporting the film and being in it. And if you watch the crowd and those performances, they are real. They are in the moment of that scene and that thing. So I felt nothing but a great commitment from the country, and the fact that we were from outside, and I think the approach that we were taking, that we were being inclusive, and that they could see that we were very, very conscious to make it feel real, and that we were using the communities, we were using the crew and the cast from those communities and the country, and they could see how well, they could feel it. They could feel it when they were watching it, because they were involved in it. They could see it, and they could see how we were making it. So it was, that energy kind of suffused the whole experience, really.
There was make no mistake, you know, from my perspective, when I, you know, sort of traveled into communities to speak and just sit down, you know, and observe, and especially in Joburg, where there's a young sort of, you know, energy there, and, you know, some of these people my age and younger know who I am and what I've done, and, you know, when I would sit with them, there was no doubt in their head that they, you know, they looked me in the eye and said, do you understand the responsibility that you have here, pal? You know, although it was very much accepting of me doing it, but they wanted me to understand the responsibility of that, and that speaks about the culture, about the way they, you know, that they hold this story dear to their hearts. And for me, you know, I wasn't expecting to be completely accepted as Madiba immediately, you know, for various reasons, but there was certainly the sort of willingness for us to go for it, but know that you only have one chance. You know, there was no messing about here with this character and this story. That was made very apparent to me in the beginning, very much so.
Question down front.
Silvia Bizziola, Repubblica of Italy. I was wondering if even in some early stages of the film, if Mr. Mandela had a chance to see some of the movie, and also, Mr. Singh, if you can tell me, in all these years in developing the film, you said how, you know, you got the rights and it was a big struggle, but throughout these years, did you feel competition from other parts? I mean, was there always a complete acceptance of what you were doing? So these two things.
ANANT would, I mean, we met just before we started filming. I spent some time with Madiba, ANANT and I did, and then I think ANANT took some materials, and there was that scene where Idris is walking on the veldt at the end of the film, and ANANT took a series of images, and I think that scene to him, and Madiba said, "Is that me?" You know, as he was watching it. So, and so that, I have to say, and you were asking earlier about, you know, the moment that you knew that Idris was really digging deep, was that moment when, that was like on the first day, I think, of shooting, that we had 1 day of helicopter, so I had to do the action sequence of the car chase, and then rush Idris because the sun was going, and we got in this helicopter with this great pilot who fought in the Angolan War and stuff, and Idris got out of the car. We had 10 minutes to shoot that last shot, the very, very last shot of the scene, and something magic happened on that shot, because from the moment it started and those kids running, I'd given them the direction down on the floor and then gone up in this helicopter, and as the helicopter got near, I was like, yeah, Idris was Madiba. It was Madiba. It was like, and the camera just swooped round him. And 6 months later, I got it in the DI suite, and all the crew were looking at it, the graders, and they said, there's not one blade of grass that's moving. And the helicopter got so close. How did that happen? So I think that was an unbelievable start to the filming. And from that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. But after it cut, sun went down straight away.
I got to see him at the end of last year, and as Justin mentioned, I took some scenes on an iPad and let him watch it. And when he saw that scene, and he said, "And is this me?" And then he smiled. I said, "It's Idris," and this is. I had to then explain and show him the transformation of Idris, from the young Mandela to the old with the prosthetics and all of that. And then he started laughing, and he said, and that was to me that he endorsed Idris because, hey, if he says, "Is that me?" That's it, But then on your other point on pressure and the other films and all of that, I tried to sort of keep a resolute path. This is the quintessential story. We want to tell the epic biopic, his entire journey, and was that he never pressurized me. And as Idris mentioned about patience, the one thing about Madiba was when I got the rights, he gave it to me, we had a chat about it. At one point, the lawyers wanted script approval, and I had to go to Mr. Mandela, sit with him and explain dramatic license. And he said, "Don't bother me, I trust you, go make the movie." And so for me, it was that on the one hand, the responsibility, but on the other hand, we had to do it right. And however long it took, and the other films came and went, and, yes, it was a sort of mixed emotion, are we getting sidelined? But as they came out and as I watched them, I said, no, we've got the one. It's the only one that he has supported, endorsed, blessed, and the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which is the custodian of his legacy, have really been very supportive also.
Hi, Neil Smith from the BBC News website. Idris, the beginning part of the film, Mandela is no saint, and shows him in a fairly, particularly in relation to his first marriage. Did you have any qualms about portraying the less flattering aspects of his character, or did the fact you're from another country and culture give you more freedom to explore those aspects?
Yeah, I think we were very keen to sort of portray Mandela, as Justin said, as a man, as a human being, and that included, some of his parts of his life that may not be as flattering as we might think. That was an important part of the performance for me. I mean, I think we've seen the saintly Mandela that we all know and love, and I think it was important for us to explore and take the audience on a journey prior to that and understanding who he was. Because when you understand who he was, where he came from, he was my age when he became an activist. I'm 41, so it was around that time when he became an activist, but he'd lived a very full life prior to that. And when you understand that, then you understand how long of a walk that freedom is. It's a component of I think that some filmmakers may have wanted to digress from, for obvious reasons. But I think Justin and Bill certainly wanted to make that a part of this story, make it weighty. And then for me as an actor, that was a challenge. I didn't want to deface Mr. Mandela in any way, but I didn't want to portray him in a way that wasn't honest. And I think we achieved it gracefully and honestly. It's important. So the fabric of this film and the journey that Anant has, he'd known him for a long time. So it was important that we did have both sides of this character, the good and the bad.
And if I could just add to that, leaving aside him beating up his wife or being unfaithful, this is a guy with a profound sadness in him. And we wanted very much to say that at the moment of his greatest victory, there was this sadness, this sense that he'd lost what was central to his personal life. And that, I think, is as significant as any other part of it, and which Idris remarkably brought out.
He did also say to me that, I have strengths and weaknesses, and we discussed the fact that, we want to tell it all. And he is the first to admit, I'm an everyman. I'm like you and me, you know, and you should tell my story totally honestly.
Linda Carter for G98.7. I want to thank everybody for your work, for your dedication on this film. I think it is so important that he's still alive, and this generation of young people have no idea what he's gone through. They see everything come up on the screen, car crashes, etc., but this is a man who is still alive, and he has changed the world. And I think it's so important for young people now to recognize that and to understand that this is living history, because they've lost, because so many of them have lost it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone tweeted last night, obviously a young person, the Gandhi of our generation, which was very, very nice to read.
Question way in the back.
Hi, I'm Johanna Schneller from the Globe and Mail. You talked, Justin, about once Idris was cast. Can you talk a little bit about the specific things you saw in him that made you cast him in the first?
Well, I don't think anybody was expecting me to cast Idris, you know. I think there was more kind of, there was other choices I think that had been going on down the years, and there was a casting director I worked with in the UK that had said, because I was a huge fan of The Wire, you know, I was there, string a bell. In fact, when I arrived in Canada yesterday, I came through the airport and I was at customs, and the guy said, "So what are you here for?" I said, "I'm with a film." And he goes, "Oh, right, which one?" I said, "Mandela." He goes, "Who's in that?" I went, Idris Elba. He went, "String a bell." You can go through. It was really, I mean, look, I wanted also to, this casting director said to me, "You'd really click with him." You know, I love working with actors. That's the most important thing for me, is to create environments for actors to be free and to be supported. And so I said to ANANT, "Listen, I really think Idris, you know, I know he's not, I know he doesn't look like Madiba, he's exactly the same height as Madiba, but, you know, we're not going for a look-alike, sound-alike version of Mandela, we're trying to catch the spirit." So I got on a plane and came here. Idris was shooting, and I just talked to him and told him how we were going to make it, and we just really clicked, and I know he's an instinctive actor, and I know he's an honest actor and subtle, and he's a good man, and he's brave, fearless. To be able to go into those shoes from outside, I knew that by the end of those 3 days that I could go back and make the film, because I had Mandela, and without the Mandela, we had no film. And so thank you to my producers. They supported that, because, you know, there was other obvious choices that we could have made, but Idris was the brave choice, and because he caught this spirit of him. And I spent quite a lot of time with people that knew Mandela as a young man, and we all know how intelligent and articulate and that Mandela is, but also what they talked about was this star that walked into a room, this energy that walked into a room. And you spend time with Idris Elba and you feel that energy, you know. And I was lucky enough to meet Madiba when he was 93, and even at 93, this electricity just radiates off him. It's quite extraordinary, and in our small way, you know, I wanted to try and capture that, and Idris came on that journey and was brave enough to do it, and I thank him for doing that, because, you know, coming from outside and being a Londoner, and me from being Manchester, you know, we had to get it right. We had one chance.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. One in the back there.
Hello, my name is Swati Sharan. I'm actually representing Minority Review, which is a website from India. And I guess I was observing in the film yesterday about how Mandela was protesting in the beginning, like he was saying, you know, well, I guess, you know, like that the white South Africans would basically get hit when they didn't have anyone to clean their bathrooms or do certain types of work. And so it made me sort of think about a couple of points. One was I couldn't help but compare it with Gandhi's independence struggle, which sort of looked at fighting across classes, because he had to fight with both the caste system as well as on the income level. And in the movie, I noticed how you know, basically it seems like in the beginning when they're showing Mandela saying, okay, like hit him where it hurts, it didn't look like he had to struggle, across some of those lines, amongst the South African public. So is this the way South African culture is designed? Like maybe is there less of a class or class system or hierarchy system there?
It's a completely different country. The whole struggle, Mandela's struggle compared with Gandhi's struggle, is quite different. Gandhi was against the British imperialist machine, which was actually a very small number of people with a lot of guilt. The South African situation, you had a white minority who had nowhere else to go. These guys had their backs up against the wall, and they knew that if they ever allowed, well, you saw it in the movie, the black majority to take over, as far as they were concerned, that was suicidal. That was what Mandela had to deal with. And the extraordinary thing is, I mean, I don't know of a single other example in history where an oppressed minority has taken over power without a bloodbath. And it's because Mandela was able to do that through his power to alleviate the fear of his enemies that we have a model in Mandela's life and in the film, because a lot of people don't know that frankly resonates across the world, needs to resonate across the world, everywhere. And that's the response. I'm sorry, I'm not quite answering your question, but I do really want to say this. This is the responsibility we took on in making this film.
Well, Gandhi very much inspired Mandela, and also Gandhi spent 21 years in South Africa, and the foundation of the experience that he had in South Africa was very much what influenced him in India. So, there's a connection, but the circumstances were completely different.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom is a TIFF Gala presentation. It had its world premiere last night. There are 2 more public screenings, one today at noon at the Princess of Wales Theatre, one Friday at 5:30 at the TIFF Bell Lightbox Theatre 1, and it's in theaters November 29th, I believe. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
You should have said something about that. This is like a hard question. Exactly. It's like just once you start.